Have you ever questioned whether the world's cacophonous clamor and exaggerated demands about physical qualities that are genuinely in line with what constitutes a relationship, particularly something as particular as a man's private dimensions? As a 90-year-old grandmother who has spent decades researching human health and well-being, I can tell you that I have witnessed fads come and go, and generations of people search for false ideas about what true intimacy should entail. However, as the years went by, it became very evident to me that most people concentrate on the wrong things. Indeed, they obsess over metrics, outward appearances, and grandiose claims, while neglecting the subtle strength of emotional intimacy, respect, and empathy, which truly constitute the essence of true intimacy. The limiting narrative that a man's penis size determines the quality of a love relationship is promoted by society. You hear it alluded to in glossy magazine advertisements and discussed at dinner parties. But do these exaggerated tales now genuinely reflect reality? I've lived long enough to tell you that the idea that a particular metric will ensure romantic satisfaction is more than just a mistake, based on my extensive experience on this planet. It is a damaging misconception and diversion that diverts our focus from things that genuinely nurture the heart and mind. Let's begin by creating a more comprehensive image. Think of the late elegant actress Katharine Hepburn enthralled audiences not only with her beauty or the leading men in her roles, but also with the depth and intelligence she brought to each one. She was no stranger to love stories, both on and off screen, but nothing in her life or interviews ever implied that a relationship's success depended on something as trivial as physical size. Instead, what made her so adored was the genuineness, wit, and emotional generosity she displayed. In the same way, it's not about chasing a fiction, rather it's about being fully yourself and cherishing another person in their entirety. As someone who has worked with countless elderly patients over the years and observed the complexities of human relationships through the lenses of medicine, psychology, and social science, I've discovered that genuine relationship fulfillment entails a dance of trust, communication, and emotional support. When I mention intimacy, I don't only mean the physical act. Intimacy is created by those routine actions that convey messages like, I see you, I value you, and I care about how you feel. The way a couple laughs together at a joke that only they know, the tender grasp of a hand during a trying time, or the tolerance they display when one of them feels uncertain or vulnerable, none of that depends on anatomical proportions. This fact is supported by decades of clinical observation and current research. The so-called size factor, which so many people worry about or obsess over, hardly registers as a decisive element in how couples experience intimacy. Instead, what often matters more is the willingness to truly listen, adapt, and respond to each other's needs with genuine kindness. Medical professionals, psychologists, and relationship experts have repeatedly studied the factors that promote strong, fulfilling relationships and have found that communication, empathy, respect, and compassion sit at the center of lasting bonds. I recall a conversation I once had with a gentleman in his 70s, a former surgeon who had traveled the world, been married twice, and enjoyed a fulfilling life. He told me that for all his early insecurities about his physical attributes, worries that plagued him, since adolescence, he eventually learned that what endeared him to his partners was his sense of humor, his gentle patience, and the way he made them feel understood. He realized his partners cherished the feeling of being cared for, not measured against some arbitrary standard reflecting on his decades of experience. He confessed how liberating it was to finally shed the false notion that satisfaction depended on something as trivial as size. Let's also think about those iconic figures who shaped our understanding of love and intimacy. For instance, the poet and memoirist Maya Angelou never discussed physical characteristics as the cornerstone of love. Instead, she discussed empathy and connection. She also believed in the therapeutic power of kindness and the transformative potential of paying close attention to another person. In my decades of working with patients and families, I have found that true intimacy is found in the softer, subtler qualities that define our shared humanity rather than in physical measurements. This type of wisdom is the result of lifetimes of observation, trial, and growth. I've come across a lot of folks who harbored misconceptions that damaged their sense of self. One man already in his 80s confessed to me that he'd spent most of his life feeling inadequate, burdened by the idea that he might be too small to satisfy his wife when he finally found the courage to talk with her, openly, truly sharing his fears. For the first time, her eyes welled with tears. She had never considered that insecurity, even once. From her perspective, their intimacy had always been rich and meaningful. She loved him for his kindness, his unwavering support, and the comfort of his presence. She would often say how their emotional closeness had grown immeasurably stronger over the years as they navigated loss, illness, the departure of grown children, and the gentle passage into old age. His worry had been like a tiny splinter under the skin, nagging and painful, but completely irrelevant to the health of their Maori marriage. After that honest conversation, the couple emerged with a newfound tenderness and relief. They realized what had always mattered was that they cared deeply, listened attentively, and cherished each other's company. This example, like many others I've come across, demonstrates how the myth of size can both create needless pain and divert our attention from what really matters. It seems like we are all too frequently trained to place more value on the wrapping paper than the actual present. We lose sight of what partnerships are supposed to provide: companionship, love, and growth when we become fixated on size. We learn to settle with superficial guarantees rather than developing true depth, much as crucially the idea that size equates to contentment can lead to a negative dynamic in which one spouse feels. Many women I observed would much prefer have a spouse who attends to their feelings, comfort, and enjoyment than one who only meets some superficial ideal because they feel compelled to live up to impossible ideals while the other partner's actual desires go unheard. When I talk about such topics, I also consider how aging alters our viewpoints because the human body is incredibly diverse, and there is no ideal model for what makes a couple's intimate life meaningful. Meaning is something you discover together, shaped by communication, trust, and mutual exploration. As we age, we come to understand how ephemeral some of our childhood passions might be. Our bodies alter, our health changes, and the people we love may leave us. In the face of life's transience, what keeps us going isn't the perfection of form, but the warmth of an actual connection. As intimacy develops, it becomes less about outside influences and more about how we help each other feel at home in the world. This sense of home is never about unreasonable standards or measuring tapes. It's about safety, comprehending care, and acceptance. My advice to you is to start by having honest conversations with your partner, friends, or even a trusted professional who can help dispel harmful misconceptions. If you're reading this, you may be seeking reassurance or wondering how to create a deeper, more fulfilling relationship that goes beyond the physical myths that are circulating. Find out what makes you feel comfortable and what makes you feel loved by asking each other what it is. Bring laughter and excitement into your shared experiences. Establish a space where you can both freely communicate your desires, anxieties, and fantasies without feeling guilty or judged. Above all, keep in mind that genuine closeness relies on empathy and authenticity rather than fitting into a predetermined mold. It's important to remember that many couples experience their highest levels of happiness much later, after they have mastered the ability to comprehend each other's emotional and psychological needs, rather than in the so-called prime of their youth. Sceneries. It's simple to get caught up in superficial assessments when you're young, such as a person's facial shape, body hardness, or even the size of a certain organ. But as we mature, we discover that these superficial characteristics do not ultimately determine our level of happiness. Intimacy is much more like a tapestry made of threads of love, tolerance, forgiveness, humor, and compassion. Some couples achieve their pinnacle of understanding decades into their union, discovering a depth that would not have been possible if they had continued to focus on unimportant physical standards. History is replete with well-known people who understood this truth. Although she rarely made public remarks about issues of sexual intimacy, as was customary in her era, Eleanor Roosevelt was a remarkable woman who championed social progress and human rights. She understood that meaningful bonds arise from empathy, intellectual companionship, and mutual respect. Her emphasis on understanding others and connecting with them on a profound, heartfelt level is evidence of what truly nurtures relationships. Roosevelt's legacy serves as a reminder that moral courage and depth of character are far more important to the human soul than outward appearances. Of course, this does not negate the importance of physicality. It can contribute to attraction, bonding, and pleasure, but it should never be interpreted as a strict set of rules that determine one's worth or desirability. Rather, consider physical characteristics as a single note in a much larger symphony, the music of which is a loving relationship made up of numerous instruments. Mental exercise, common beliefs, emotional safety, and light-hearted humor, observance of boundaries, and the tender treatment. When one is struggling, focusing only on one note or measure at the expense of the full score means missing out on the great composition. Let's speak about concrete actions we can take to change our mindset. For example, if you've always been worried or nervous about your size, start by admitting that these emotions exist. You can't get over feelings of inadequacy by acting as though they don't exist. Talk about this with a partner or a trusted friend. Or if that seems too intimidating, think about getting advice from a counselor or therapist who specializes in relationship and sexual health. Sometimes just naming the fear and saying it out loud lessens its power, and you may be relieved that your loved ones never gave this supposed flaw any weight. To start, another strategy is to develop emotional literacy. Learn to communicate your needs. What frightens you and what thrills you? If cultural myths have prevented you from talking about your anxieties, emotional intimacy frequently blossoms in the midst of open, courteous communication about what thrills you and what you hope to give your partner. When you dare to admit, "I've always worried about this," or "I've been feeling certain lately," you bring your spouse into a space of trust and understanding, and frequently their response is one of consoling words, reassurance, or just a loving embrace. Remember that genuine connection lives on vulnerability. Embrace demonstrates that their sentiments for you are much more profound than any physical characteristic. It's also critical to keep in mind that as we age, gravity, time, and life events deform and sculpt our bodies, changing our appearance and capacities, but these modifications frequently enhance rather than lessen our capacity for profound connection. Over time, to discover new forms of intimacy and pleasure that fit with changing bodies and changing desires, partners learn to be sensitive to each other's weaknesses. While we live in a culture full of exaggerated depictions of intimacy, age teaches us that love and intimacy can adapt and flourish in situations that our younger selves may not have imagined. The media frequently presents us with characters that are airbrushed fantasy. When flawless relationships are reduced to ephemeral sexual desire, the reality is that true human connections are significantly more messier, warmer, and more complex. They involve awkward times, misunderstandings, and the need for forgiveness. They show lovers who help one another through sickness, loss, and disappointment. They teach them to see the beauty in wrinkles, scars, and imperfections. They celebrate the emotional fortitude that that develops from overcoming life's obstacles together. None of these fundamental components of intimacy can be adequately expressed by a straightforward physical measurement. As we as elders openly challenge these harmful narratives, we free younger people from unnecessary burdens of anxiety and shame and give them a healthier, more expansive understanding of what it means to love and be loved by dispelling the myth of size as a measure of worth. By doing this, we also help set the stage for future generations. Younger people frequently inherit myths about intimacy without questioning them. Harmony. I remember a young couple in their late 20s who came to me anxious and uncertain after seeking counsel. The young man was afraid that his spouse might not be happy because he didn't fit some internalized fictional norm. Over time, as they cultivated their relationship, they realized that what really held them together had nothing to do with myths, but rather with the genuineness of their daily connection from a medical perspective. The young woman, who was shocked that he would even worry about this, listed all the things she loved about him, including his kindness, sense of humor, patience in teaching her how to cook new dishes, and the way he consoled her when she was feeling down. She never once mentioned size. Sexual health practitioners stress the value of discussion about mutual enjoyment and experimenting to determine what works best for both partners. No single physical characteristic ensures contentment. Rather, discovering one's emotional comfort zones is frequently the first step toward happiness. Experimenting with different methods of communication, such as massage, gentle touch, or just disclosing secrets that foster emotional intimacy, the space you establish together might improve intimacy. A quiet room, soft lighting perhaps, music that both of you find soothing or exciting. All these details matter far more than a numerical measurement ever could when we think about the great love stories, fictional or real, the ones that have endured through centuries, are never primarily about physical perfection. They're about devotion, sacrifice, understanding, and an enduring capacity to see one another's souls, whether it's the tragic romance of Romeo and Juliet, the quiet resilience of couples who have survived wars, or the late-life companionship of two people who rediscover affection after heartbreak. The common thread is emotional gravity. Their intimacy resonates with us because it touches something universal. The human longing to connect deeply and wholeheartedly. If you're still watching this video, I encourage you to comment one below to let me know you're here, engaged, and learning. If it isn't resonating, leave a 0 or share a keyword of what you'd like to understand better. Your feedback helps shape future conversations, ensuring that we focus on matters that truly enrich lives and promote healthier, kinder understandings of human relationships. By now, the idea that size is a shallow metric that diverts attention from the incalculable depth of what intimacy may be has started to be dispelled. In the end, what really lasts is not how we look, but rather how we make each other feel in the privacy of a loving relationship. We have discovered that true closeness results from emotional intelligence, consistent respect, and the willingness to care for each other's emotional wounds and celebrate each other's joys. The most important thing is that we provide a secure environment where both hearts may find comfort, understanding, and a sense of belonging. As we proceed, we'll go more deeply into useful strategies for developing these emotional traits, question ingrained beliefs, and reinterpret our own expectations in order to embrace what really counts. Together, let's flip the page, shedding outdated misconceptions and welcoming a more sincere and caring perspective on intimacy and love.